ルフィ、私はあなたの決定に従うけど、海賊の同盟には裏切りがつきものよ。人を信じすぎるあなたには不向きかもしれない。
え、お前裏切んのか？
いや。やろな！ちった疑え。
Hello everyone and welcome again to another video. This time we are going over the blue-yellow Nami Deck Tech video. This one's taken me a long time to get together because there's so much flexibility with this leader. But let's go ahead and get into it before further ado. So first thing I want to throw out there is I have a TCG player affiliate link. If there's any cards that I talk about in this video that you're interested in purchasing, please consider hopping down to use that link. It helps out a lot. All right, so getting right into it, let's start with the leader. So she is a 5k leader with 4 life, blue and yellow, and her abilities are your turn, once per turn. This effect can be activated when a card is removed from your or your opponent's life cards. If you have 7 or less cards in your hand, draw 1 card. And then her second ability is done times 1. On your opponent's attack, once per turn, you may trash 1 card from your hand. This leader gains 2,000 power during this turn. So a couple things immediately jump out here. The 2 abilities have different kind of places where they are relevant. One is on your turn, one is on your opponent's turn. The one on your turn is a very strong card advantage engine that is effective both on you taking your life, which is important for cards like Hiori, or if you take a life from your opponent, which is useful with cards like burn damage, like in the OP09 Robin or the OP10 Kid, or just swinging resiliently, or swinging with a big enough body. So that first leader ability is pretty offensively minded, and then her second ability, going to getting plus 2,000 for the turn, is a lot more defensive. That kind of balance between the 2 lists does make for some kind of tension in the deck. That is probably one of the reasons why we don't see Nami at the very tippy top of the meta, just because there's that tension there and it's hard to build around both effectively. So getting into pros and cons for those abilities, you have that strong card advantage engine and a strong defensive ability. So they're both are very strong abilities, just at different times of the thing, different times in the game. The second leader ability gives you resilience to bricking because you can always just pitch no counter cards. This is very effective and probably something you want to use pretty frequently, is countering out with no counter cards and just getting those cards out of your hand, and then on the following turn swinging in with leader, or otherwise taking a life out of somebody's life so that you can draw those cards back. So that works pretty well. She has some pretty cheap removal options that we'll get into that are uniquely usable in her leader ability. And then a last pro I wanted to kind of point out is because her leader abilities are both strong, it gives her quite a bit of flexibility on how you can play, as long as you are building towards at least one of the 2 abilities. Cons on this: the draw side of her first ability is not guaranteed. There will definitely be times when your opponent can kind of stiff you out of a card by countering really aggressively, and if you haven't drawn one of your cards to take your own life, then you can kind of get stiffed out of that life, which can be pretty negative because you are a 4 life leader, and that card draw is really important in making your deck work. The defensive ability does not protect characters. That's a really big one. One of the things that I find most often with in the games that are get away from me, it's when my opponent can get into a mode where they can starve me and I can't protect my board, and then they slowly chip away at my life later in the game with fewer larger attacks that kind of lessens the ability for you to use the defensive plus 2k. The 1 Dawn on your leader for your defensive ability does require you play off curve a lot of the time. It's another pretty big downside. You won't be able to play and use the Dawn as efficiently as your opponent a lot of the time. And then the final con, I think this is inherent to the colors, so it could get solved at some point in the future. Both blue and yellow don't have the strongest finishers. We don't have a lot of really big, like 12k bodies to win the game with in these colors. So it can sometimes be a struggle to get enough on board to finish the game. Even if you have a lot of defensive ability, it can be hard to kind of close out the game. All right, so getting into a basic starting list, I please ask that you watch the rest of the video because I know a lot of people are here just for this this piece, but I do want to explain to you guys all the nuances and different card options because this is just one list and there are a whole bunch of different options for this leader. But if you are here just for the deck list, here it is. Key points on this one is you have some early interaction through Noico and Zeus early so that you can pretty efficiently get their board out of the way and be swinging with your leader. So what you want to do early game is try to accumulate value through your leader ability so that you can gather up card advantage either for protecting board or for surviving some really good and big late game things. And then you want to finish the game by setting up a couple of your big bodies and either putting into a spot where you can get them low on hand and then swing with several big bodies all at once, or using Nojiko, Zeus, Red Rock to remove blockers and then get in with several big swings. So that's the general game plan. This is a pretty basic list. And now I'll go into the individual card choices for this list and then options you can pick up from later. So getting into the basics, we have first the Trafalgar Law. This is a very cheap body. One of the advantages to blockers in this deck is you can use your leader ability to go to 7k and then force your opponent to invest at least to 7k for several turns for all of their remaining attacks. And then if you have cheap blockers on board, then you're getting a lot more value out of those blocks. So this is a pretty strong card to have in the deck, one to keep in mind. Cons to it though, it has no counter, which is mitigated some by your defensive leader ability being able to pitch extra copies, and it's easier to remove. So it is one that you can't rely on a lot of times to protect you. But when you do get to block with it, you're getting quite a bit of value because your opponent is having to invest more Dawn to get that big enough swing anyways. Next card we have is Nojiko. She's a 2-cost 0k with 1k counter, and on play, if your leader is Nami, return up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less to your owner's hand. This is a very efficient cost to effect ratio. Being able to remove a 5 for only 2 Dawn is really efficient. It has a 1k counter, which is great, and it is only usable in this leader and the mono blue Nami. So we're one of the few decks that actually gets to take advantage of this. Cons to this one, the removal doesn't always work. If you face into a meta with a lot of the black-purple Luffy running their 6-cost stuff or otherwise pumping their costs with their leader ability, this can sometimes miss, and then it's only a 1k in hand and it doesn't have a good body. So it can be kind of problematic if in the wrong meta. But in the right meta, it's a very effective card at just getting stuff off the board. And then not having a board presence means that if you are playing them out, you aren't able to then take advantage of swings later. So that's one of your big trade-offs. Next one we have is Hiori. She's a 2-cost 0k power, 2000 counter. On play, you may put the top or bottom card of your life pile into your hand, then put up to 1 card from your hand on the top of your life pile. This is one of the more important cards in the deck. This is a way to trigger your leader ability on turns when you can't get in for damage or otherwise burn their life, which is really important for getting the cards flowing. Also, being able to stack a life from your hand while getting to replace that card that you're drawing out of hand with your leader ability, means that you can use some pretty powerful triggers and get a lot of extra value out of stacking really strong triggers in life. Cons, just like with Nojiko, it has no board presence, so every time you play one of these out, you are not developing a board that is effective at attacking, and so you got to remember that. Moving on to the next card, we have Zeus, another 2-cost 2k counter. This one has 2,000 power, so a little bit better than the other two. His on play is you may add one card from the top or bottom of your life cards to your hand, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. So very similar to Nojiko, except instead of being quote-unquote free and just costing you the 2 Dawn, this one does also cost you a life, which is pretty expensive in a 4-life leader, but it does trigger life, so it does replace itself in your hand because you get the trigger off of your leader ability. And unlike Nojiko, this is a 2k counter, so this is just a great card to hold on to anyways. Also with, as we've seen with our other cards, we have now kind of a pattern here of a lot of cards that don't have board presence. So that's something that we need to keep in mind and think about how to mitigate as you go into the rest of the deck. The next one we have here is the 2-cost 3,000 power 1k counter Marshall D. Teach from the starter deck. His ability is activate main once per turn. Place up to one of your place one card from your hand at the top of your deck, and then attach up to 2 rested Dawn to one of your leaders or characters. So this card is primarily used in the deck to help mitigate the downside of needing Dawn on your leader for your defensive ability, and it gives you a lot of extra Dawn per turn if you're using it. The cons to it is it doesn't have the greatest board presence, better than all of our previous ones, especially because you can use this ability on himself to make him a natural 5k attacker at the cost of a card out of your hand. That card disadvantage is a bit mitigated by your leader ability, but if you find yourself in a spot where you put a card back on top and then are unable to trigger your leader ability, it is straight up card disadvantage, which can be really problematic, especially if your opponents are attempting to starve you out. You can get into a spot where you don't have enough cards to defend life, and you don't have enough board to take their life, which can be a pretty problematic spot to find yourself in. Other advantages of this one that we'll get into a lot more as we go into it is that being able to control the top card of your library is sometimes translatable into the top card of your life, which means that just like with Hiori, where you were able to stack powerful triggers, you can use Teach in concert with a couple other cards to do the same. So just keep that in mind as we're going through the other ones, that Teach is a pretty strong way to set the top card of your library. Moving into the next card here, we have the 4-cost 6,000 power no counter Konojo, who has on KO, if your opponent has 3 or less life, place the top card of your deck onto your life. This is one of the ways you can kind of convert the top card of your library into the top card of your life. Your opponents are the ones who are able to control the timing of this a lot of times, so it's not an efficient way to get the top card of your library into your life, but it is a possibility. And then she also has a trigger if your opponent is at 3 life or less. Play this card. That's the most common line that we see with this one. That means that this body, which is very efficient at a 4-cost 6k, comes out for free. And your opponents are unlikely to want to kill it unless they have a pretty good spot on the board, because you'll get to heal. Cons to it is there's no counter, and that life trigger and the heal are both conditional. Against 3 life leaders like Blue Purple Luffy, and against 4 life leaders, that's usually not a problem, but against 5 life leaders in particular, it's really tough to get this down early enough to really take advantage of either of those abilities. By the time you do have them down to 3 life, this card is starting to become less valuable on the board. But it is a very strong play to use Hiori on your 2 Dawn turn to stack one of these against maybe a blue-purple Luffy, and then when your opponent swings into you, you get a free body, and then on 4-dawn, you get to play a second one. And you have a pretty effective board state at that point without too much investment. But again, that no counter, you're going to end up tossing these to leader ability a lot. Next, we have another 4-cost 6K. That efficient stat line is pretty important in this leader because we don't generally have a lot of other strong ways to establish board. So being able to efficiently get power on board is important. He also has no counter, so just like with Konojo, you're going to be frequently discarding him to leader ability if it's not early in the game. And then his ability reads, when attacking once per turn, draw 2 cards and trash 1 from your hand. This is a very important ability because we're running as many bricks as we are, to be able to flow through those cards and get rid of when you have too many bricks that you're not going to be able to play. It's good to get rid of those. So pros to this guy, that efficient body and that card advantage engine are very important, but cons, him not having counter is I mean, something that we can mitigate reasonably, but it is a real disadvantage, especially at the end of the game when you can't well control what cards you're going to have left. These cards being in life can be a pretty big downside that you can't really rely on your life to get you out. Next, we have our 4-cost 4,000 power 1k counter Pudding. She has the ability on play, your opponent return all of their cards to their deck and shuffle their deck, and then your opponent draws 5 cards. So this is very, very strong against big hand decks. Think your NLs, think your blue-purple Luffys at particular times. All of the purple Luffys actually end up running quite heavy on cards in hand. And so this is the kind of card that either forces your opponent to counter more aggressively early, letting you get a lot more pressure on their board, or they run the risk of you playing down a Pudding and wiping their hand out right at the end of the game, right when you've got the ability to kind of go for life. Cons to this one, it's not very good board pressure, so you really are reliant on having some of your earlier cards to establish that board state. And then another con is that it's only mildly effective against some decks. Blue-purple Luffy, even though it seems like a slam dunk to kind of get rid of all the cards they have in hand, they are frequently able to redraw into one of their big counter events. And as soon as you do not kill them on the Pudding turn, they are rapidly drawing 2 or 3 cards a turn and recovering from that cut down to 5 very rapidly. So it's timing specific, and against other decks like a Bello Betty or something like that, it may never come up. So just something to keep in mind that this card won't always be useful. Next, we have another 2k counter. This one's a 5-cost 5,000 power Sattorii. He has no abilities, but he does have trigger. You may trash 1 card from your hand, play this card. So that trigger body is really good, especially if you're facing up against a 5-life leader. You can Hiori Sattorii into life early to get out that board presence right away in a way that doesn't work with Okiku because they aren't at 3 life or less. Cons to this one, it is not very good card to play in any other context rather than just putting it in your life. And the discard does, in its trigger cost, does make a pretty big difference. Even though you are likely able to recover some of those cards back from the leader ability, him only being a 5k body means he will require a bit more investment in protection. So sometimes you won't be able to protect it and will end up only getting a single swing out of it. So just things to keep in mind. At the worst case, it's still a 2k counter. Next, we have our 5-cost 6,000 power 1k counter blocker Nami from OP11. She has on play if your leader is multicolored, which we are. Draw 3 cards and place 2 cards from your hand at the top or bottom of your deck. So this is a very strong card filtering thing. We have a lot of bricks. It's really important to have that ability to draw a lot of cards, see a lot of cards, and then put bricks on the bottom. Or in the situation that we are ready to stack a card into life from the top of our deck, we can put cards very specifically back on our deck, which is something that is not always doable otherwise. And worst case, it is a card neutral blocker. One of the cons to this is 6K blockers are probably at one of their weaker points in specifically this Nami leader, because our opponents are already incentivized to swing at 7K or higher. Your 6K blockers don't usually get you any extra value, whereas in 5K leaders, making your opponent always swing for 6 is a much stronger angle. So things to keep in mind with 6K blockers, that they're a lot less effective in this leader than they are in some of the other leaders. Next card we have is the 7 cost, 8,000 power, no counter, Big Mom from STO7. She has on play, if your opponent chooses one of the following effects: trash 1 life card from the top of your opponent's life area, or put 1 card from the top of your deck onto the top of your life area. So this is a very strong effect. Both sides are very effective things. The issue is your opponent will always get to pick which of them is worse for you. So that means that you'll never able to rely on this effectively doing anything unless you really have your opponent kind of pinned down, and in which case the difference between the two effects is a lot smaller because you already have them kind of pushed into a corner. Cons to this card: it always is a brick in hand. We're gonna have a whole bunch of bricks in this deck, and it's just one of the realities that some games you will just draw all of your bricks and never draw enough counter, and you will lose because of it. Upsides to it is a 7 cost, which is a lot harder to interact with in the meta, because for example, Lin hitting 6 costs, not 7, and then 8Ks are reasonably hard to remove. They can survive several 9K swings out of blue-purple with a little bit of protection, especially if you've had an opportunity to save up your 2Ks. And then otherwise, this is just a reasonably strong card into the meta. Next, we have our 8 cost, 9,000 power, no counter, Eustace Captain Kidd. His on play is you may rest this character, trash 1 card from the top of your opponent's life cards, and then at the end of your turn, if your opponent has 2 or less life cards, draw 1 and trash 1. So this will always trigger your leader ability if you haven't otherwise triggered it for the turn. It's a strong in-game body at that 9K stat line, and the card filtering on that end of turn trigger are all really important for this leader. Like I mentioned, the bricks we will always have. That card filtering can be the difference between life and death sometimes. Cons to it: again, it has no counter, so even though it helps mitigate the bricking situation, you are if you draw this one, you may be bricked. The other thing that is a pretty significant con is it immediately rests itself. So even though it does get through for at least 1 life, it is something that your opponents can immediately swing into, which can be a problem if they're really trying to starve you. Like if you end up at 3 life, then playing this guy out might not be effective because you want your opponents to swing into you, not into your characters, so that you can kind of refill your hand. So that's a kind of vulnerability to it. Next, we have the 8 cost, 8,000 power Secret Luffy. It has no counter. It has rush all the time, no questions asked, which is not something that can be said about every card with rush. This works against Blackbeard, which isn't true of all of our rushers. So then it has a when attacking, you may trash a card from your hand, return up to 1 character with a cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand, then give up to 1 rested on card to your leader or one of your characters. So pros to this one: rush is great for finishing games. The when attacking ability can bounce blockers. It can bounce stuff like Burgess. It can bounce your own 2Ks that you played out earlier in the game. And the leader ability, or this when attacking ability, also gives you the non you need for your leader ability, which can be hard, especially in game situations, to also invest the card into leader. Cons to it: like all of our other top ends, we have no counter. The body is slightly inefficient, so once you're paying 8 for it and only getting an 8k swing, it can be a situation where you're just not exerting enough pressure for that much Dawn investment, and you may not be able to punch through on a turn because you had to invest so much into this swing. And just like with Kid, oftentimes you're going to find yourself swinging with this one right away, which means your opponents get to swing back into it if you're not winning the game, which helps them starve you, which is pretty common near the end of the game. Next, we have the one-cost event Red Hawk, the Gum Gum Fire Pistol Red Hawk. So it has 2 options. It's main, rest. You may rest 3 of your Dawn cards, so 4 Dawn total. If you and your opponent have a total of 5 or more life cards, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a base cost of 5 or less. And then its counter ability is up to one of your leader gains 3,000 power during this turn. So this one acts as removal early in the game, an extra counter late in the game, and it is a very clear, clean answer to Sanji and Pudding even when they have stage, because it is a base cost of 5. Cons to this one: the removal can turn off inconveniently because, say, into Bello Betty, if your opponent takes a life and then swings really heavy into you, it may not work to actually remove their Karasu or something like that. And then a lot of times in the end game, it's hard to hold up extra Dawn for that counter because you need to put a Dawn on leader, and you're probably playing a large body. Having that one extra sometimes just isn't a possibility. Moving on to the next card, we have Red Rock. This is a 6-cost event. On main, place up to 1 character at the bottom of its owner's deck. So this one is no questions asked, removes big targets. It also has a trigger of place 1 character with a cost of 4 or less at the bottom of its owner's deck. This one is particularly interesting into stuff like Bello Betty or into stuff like Blackbeard. If you can strategically set this into life at the right time, then you can get free removal in a way where they may be expecting an Okiku or a Sattorii to come out of life. You can remove a body. Cons to it: it has no counter, like a lot of cards in our deck. And then also the 6 cost on it is actually pretty difficult to play alongside other cards. A lot of times when you are investing the 6 into removing something, you do not get to do anything else meaningful for the turn. So keep that in mind. It is a very effective answer, but it does limit the rest of your turn. So now that we've gone through all the different cards, there's some rough categories that you probably want to shoot for if you're building this deck. For blockers, you want somewhere between 4 to 8, some number of the cheaper blockers, and then you can fit a couple more expensive ones that have more useful effects. But you want to lean towards the cheaper ones because of their usefulness in the leader ability situation. When you force them up to swings at 7s, then your blocks that only cost you 1 is a really efficient way to kind of get out of those swings. For 2k counters, you only need 10 to 12 here. You need a little bit less than most decks because your leader ability gives you the option of discarding any card to be a 2k counter essentially, and it's a 2k counter for the rest of the turn. But you don't want to go too low because you need 2k counters for protecting your board. The Hiori is probably one that's always going to be there because of how useful it is. Zeus is one that, depending on how the meta shakes out, you can afford to take more life with Zeus or less life with Zeus, so keep that one in mind. And the Sattorii, I think, is a flexible one, useful for getting your trigger bodies, because you need to have a certain amount of triggers to make Hiori its peak effectiveness. And those trigger bodies also work well when you are stacking life with Teach. Then your mid-game, this is the widest category. There's a lot of different cards that can kind of fit in here, and you'll have to balance out your different types of synergies. For this particular list, we've got Teach, Kikonojo, Cavendish, and Pudding. Notice that Kikonojo and Cavendish are there for their bodies primarily, but they don't have counter. And then Pudding is that kind of like ace in the hole, wipe out somebody's hand right at the end of the game. And then Teach is for using with your leader ability to make it to where you don't have to play off of curve. In your end game, You want a fair bit of it, but don't overload on it. They are all almost exclusively non-counter cards. And you will find yourself in a spot, especially if you can get early onto the board with your Kikonojas and Cavendishes, you need the end game less than some other decks if you can effectively get on board. The sweet spot that I found is somewhere between 8 and 12. Probably leaning a little heavier if you're leaning into some strategies, and a little lighter if you're leaning into others. So for this deck, we've got Linlin, Kid, and Luffy, who seems to be a pretty good balance of Linlin, which kind of extends the game, and then Kid and Luffy, which are going to help end the game. Finally, you have the removal. Because we get to play Nojiko and Zeus uniquely, that those are really efficient, we're going to end up playing a little bit more removal than some decks, just because of the quality we have for it. And then Red Hawk and Red Rock are good, effective answers at kind of doing the more flexible thing, while you use Zeus and Nojiko for a lot of your removal. So those are just some rough categories. Next, I'm going to go into some other alternative packages you could look into. These ones are going to be a little more synergy focused, that lean into one aspect or another of the leader ability. So let's kind of hop into those. First one we have is the Supernovas package. So I'll go through and just kind of read the cards and explain them as we go, a little less detailed than we did for the base cards. First, we have this Jewelry Bonnie. She's a 3-cost, 4,000 power with 1k counter and blocker. And on play, add the top or bottom card of your life to your hand. Then you may place up to one 5-cost. And the translation on this one is incorrect. It is exactly 5-cost Supernova type character from your hand to the top of your life face up. It is important that it is 5 costs or less, that is exactly 5 costs, because there are not a whole lot of options in Supernovas for yellow. It will always be a blocker, and it always has the option of just drawing you a card, which triggers your leader ability. So it's still defensible to play even if you don't have one of the 5 costs in your hand, but definitely there's a limitation on that, and something that you have to be aware of when you go in to play it. Moving on to the 2 5 costs, we have the Vanilla Uruge, and then this ST13 Luffy, who's a 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1k counter. Activate main once per turn. This character gains plus 2,000 power until the start of your next turn. Then, if you have one or more life cards, draw a card and trash the top card of your life. So this ability will come up less frequently than you think. It is mainly a card that you can summon off of this. And then there is the Three Brothers synergy, which is also an option to include with this. The leader ability, or this character ability, if you do choose to use it, will trigger your leader ability. So you get to effectively draw 2 and put him to an 8k, which can be effective, especially late in the game. And he keeps his power and through the whole turn, so your opponents have more difficulty removing him on the future. So definitely an option, particularly strong if you can summon it off of one of the Three Brothers package stuff, which we'll get into later. Next card here is we have this 1 cost 0k power, 2,000 counter Kaponging Beige. He has an on play. You may add 1 card from the top or bottom of your life to your hand, and then add up to 1 character with a type of Supernovas from your hand to the top of your life cards face up. This one does not have the restriction of it being 5 costs, so this one is probably generally more effective on the ability than Bonnie. So this is one that you will frequently get to trigger your leader ability, and then hopefully set something in life, and have this body on the board for purposes later, which I'll show you some of the other synergy cards that you can run with this. Yeah, so there's another 2k option. Next, we have the 1 cost 2,000 power, 1k counter Monkey D. Luffy Searcher. This is kind of the glue that holds together the whole package. It is an on-play look at the top 5 from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 Supernova other than Monkey D. Luffy. Important that it can't search this Luffy, but it can search any of the rest of the cards here. and add it to your hand. Then place the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. This is an important glue card, useful for finding top-end cards that we'll get into in a bit, or finding 2K counters or other blockers. So good flexibility card for smoothing out your deck. We already talked about this Luffy here. Next we have the Capone Beige here. He's a 2-cost 1000 power 1K counter blocker, and once per turn if you have a Supernova type character other than Capone Game Beige that would be removed from the field by your opponent's effect, you may add that character to the top of your life face down instead. This one is effective at preventing your opponents from dealing with your Supernova type board, and it always acts as a blocker. It itself can be removed, obviously, but that ability to make your board just a bit more sticky is pretty useful. A lot less effective here than it is in Green Yellow Law, but a valuable effect, especially if you have the searchers to kind of find it when you need it. Next, we have the 7-cost 9000 power no counter secret Trafalgar Law, who's got an on-play reveal up to 1 Supernova type character card from your hand and add it to the top of your life cards face down. Then give up to 1 of your Rested Dawn card to 1 of your Supernova type leaders. So you don't get the Dawn Rested Dawn part, which is quite unfortunate because it would be very strong with Nami, but you do get to stack a life. You get to treat this card just as a heal one. There aren't too many effective triggers that you are pursuing unless you are trying to stack this Luffy for the Three Brothers effects. But just healing one with a 7-cost 9K body can be really important way to extend the game and kind of set up for an in-game that works in your favor. Next, we have the 6-cost 7000 power no counter promo Law. This is a very old promo, tracking all the way back to one of the first promo packs. It has the ability on play, if your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand, add 1 of your opponent's life cards to their hand. So this is a pretty strong burn card with a pretty reasonable body. 7K is good enough to attack even into buffed up black purple Luffy's, and being able to just burn 1 of their life, no questions, can be pretty effective. It's also at 6 costs compatible with a pudding. So if you find yourself in a spot where you have them on a lot of cards, over 6 cards in life, you can play out Law, force them to take another life, and then play out Pudding to reset their hand back down to 5, which can be useful, not necessarily for closing a game, but at really messing up an opponent's hand in a way that is hard for them to play around, because if they have too big of a hand, you just make it a little bit bigger and then immediately putting it. Next, we have another 2K option. This one is mainly just because it would be a searchable 2K. We have the 3-cost 3000 power 2K counter X-Drake, who has Activate Main. You may rest this character. If the number of your life cards is equal to or less than the number of your opponent's life cards, rest up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So this one can be effective at getting through blockers, especially at an end point of the game. It acts as a pseudo blocker because your opponents aren't likely to want you to have access to this effect more than once, so they will usually swing back into it. And 3K body is effective enough to where they don't just get a free searcher swing into it, which can be pretty effective. So all in all, a pretty good 2K option if you're not running some of the other 2Ks that options in the deck. Next and finally, we've already gone over the use of Captain Kidd. In this package, it is searchable, and obviously it is a very strong card in the deck because it makes the basic list. Alright, so now moving on to our next package, we have the Wano package. So just jumping straight into it, we have our first card here is our 1-cost 0K 1K counter Searcher. Its first ability, though, is a Dawn ×2 your turn. This character gains 3000 power. So that means with 2 Dawn attached, it does hit that natural 5. So it can be an effective swinger. And then its on play is look at the top 5 cards from the top of your deck and reveal 1 Land of Wano type card with a cost of 2 or more. That 2 or more doesn't usually make a difference in this deck, but it means you can't search for the searcher. And then you place the rest at the bottom of your deck. So this one just being your effective synergy piece that works well at finding the other high quality cards in the package. Next, we have also from the starter deck the 6 cost 7,000 power Momonosuke. Your turn, if you have 2 or less life cards, your leader gains 1,000 power. This can be effective at letting you swing at the 6k leaders without any extra investment. And then its ability is activate main once per turn. You may return 2 total of your currently given Dawn, so Dawn that is on a character, and you return them to your cost area rested, and then this character gains Rush, which is a really effective in-game threat that works pretty reasonably with Marshall D. Teach, who can get you that attached Dawn pretty effectively. Next, we have the 7 cost 7,000 power Odin. He's got Dawn ×1. This character gains double attack, which makes him a pretty effective threat. And then on KO, you may trash 2 cards from your hand, add up to 1 from the top of your deck, and add it to your top of your life. So another way to get stacked cards from your deck into your life. And it also means that when you lose him, that you're not out too much because you get to gain the life. Next, we have the 9 cost 10,000 power Odin. This one just has double attack naturally, and then on KO, draw 2 cards and trash 1, which is effective for filtering out your hand. The 10 cost characters are really hard for your opponents to deal with a lot of times, so he probably just sticks to the board. And then him being a 9 means you still have 1 Dawn for leader, so useful there. Next, we have the 4 cost 5,000 power 1k counter Nekomamashi. He has Dawn ×2. This character can also attack your opponent's active characters. And he also has a trigger that is, if your opponent has 3 or less life, play this card. So it has the exact same trigger as Konojo. So it's an effective card to stack with Hiori. And then you get to swing into active characters, which can be important for swinging at early Burgesses or other pesky cards that are hard to get off the board if your opponent doesn't swing with them. Next, we have a 4 cost 5,000 power Inu Arashi. He's got 1k counter and Dawn ×2 when attacking. You can trash 1 card from your hand, KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost equal to or less than the number of your opponent's life cards. This one will pretty rapidly lose its ability here because your opponents will get low enough pretty soon, but it can be effective in the late game, clearing out maybe chump blockers or otherwise getting those early searchers out of the way so that they don't have an opportunity later to get it. The trash is also something that's mitigated pretty reasonably by your leader effect, so keep that in mind. You can use this ability more freely here than you would in several other places. And just like with Nekomamashi and with Kikunojo, he has that same trigger of if your opponent has 3 or less life, play this card. Next, we have the 5 cost 6,000 power Denjiro, who has Dawn ×2. If your opponent has 3 or less life, this character cannot be KO'd by effects. So he's a relatively sticky deck against sticky card against some cards. Doesn't protect him from everything, but does protect him from a bunch. He has no counter, which can be an important downside. And then he does have the same trigger that the other ones do. Coming out as a 6k body early off of a Hiori is great. Next, we have the 5 cost 6,000 power Momonosuke. He has no counter, but he has blocker. And on play, place up to 1 of your Wano type characters other than Momonosuke on the top or bottom of your of its owner's life pile face up. So this is most effective in putting a Hiori that you play out early back onto your life to heal. So it is both a blocker and a heal in one, which is a pretty great place to be, even though he has no counter. Next, we've already gone over Kikunojo, that 4 cost 6k, no counter, just a really efficient trigger body, and kind of sticky because your opponents don't want to KO it to give you a life. Finally, I wanted to go over the Raizo, who's a little less commonly seen. He's a 3 cost 4,000 power, 1k counter, with the same trigger as all of the others. And then when attacking, you can trash 1 card from your hand, rest up to 1 of your opponent's Dawn cards. This is really important card to consider when facing up against blue-purple and all of the other purple Luffys, because this can deny them their Gum Gum Giant, especially if you can kind of set it as your last life that your opponent thinks they're going to be safe, so they swing, and you trigger this out really late in the game, and then you can tap down their Dawn for Gum Gum Giant and really put them in a tough spot, especially if you have a well-established board otherwise. So that is the Wano package. All right, so moving on to our next package, we have the Big Mom Pirates package. This one is a little more speculative, so there's a couple cards I do want to highlight from it that I think are stronger, and then a couple cards that I think are interesting as ones that are neat options. So let's start out with some of the more interesting ones. We have the 6 cost, 7,000 power Big Mom. And on play, you may trash 1 card from your hand. Your opponent chooses one. Your opponent trashes 2 cards from their hand, or they trash the top card of their life. So either you're getting 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, or you're trashing their life, which triggers your leader ability, which gets you back the card you trashed. And then it being a 6 cost, 7,000 power is a pretty strong body, a little bit weaker than the other 7 cost Lin in the resiliency, but still quite effective. And if you kind of push your opponent into a corner, you can really affect their ability to close out the game. And the next one we have from the same starter deck is the 5 cost 6,000 power 1k counter Katakuri. He's got blocker and activate main once per turn. You can turn the top card of your life face up and give 1 up to your leader or your character's 1 rested Dawn. This mitigates the downside of your leader needing the Dawn effect attached on a blocker, and you are pretty frequently trading that top card of your life in a way that really makes this cost not particularly high. So definitely a card to consider at the cost of giving your opponent the information about what is on top of your life. Next, we have the 3 cost 5,000 power Power Sparrow. He has a trigger of discard a card to play him. And then on KO, look at the top 3 from your deck and reveal up to 1 Big Mom Pirates deck card and add it to your hand, then place the rest on the bottom. So he's a pretty effective trigger body that your opponents are unlikely to want to remove, especially if you are demonstrating that you're playing a lot of Big Mom Pirates. So it can be an effective card to pair with Hiori. And next we have the 8 cost, 8,000 power, no counter Secret Katakuri, who just has a simple on play of add up to 1 character the cost of 8 or less to the top or bottom of its owner's life face up. This can work as removal. It can work as a heal, and both of those on a pretty efficient body are a pretty good card overall. Next we have the 4 cost 5,000 power 1k counter Cracker, who has Dawn ×1. If you have less life than your opponent, this character gains double attack and 1,000 power. And then he also has a trigger of trash a card, play this card from trigger. So another card that can be paired with Hiori or otherwise deck stacking or life stacking effects to give you some kind of free value. And this double attack can exert quite a bit of pressure and put your opponent in a spot where they're countering a lot more early than they would like. Next one we have is another 2k option. This is 1 cost 1,000 power 2k counter of on play. You may add the top or bottom card of your life to your hand and then draw 1 card. With your leader ability, this effectively becomes a draw 2, which is a lot of power for the cost of just 1. But because you're a 4-life leader, you can only use these sorts of effects so many times. So definitely a trade-off there. Next, we have the 2 cost 3,000 power 2k counter Sanji. This one I think is more interesting than Flampe. And I include it here because it is searchable off of our searcher pudding, who we'll get to in a moment. But his ability is Dawn ×2 when attacking. That looks like this translation here is a little missing a little bit. But Dawn ×2 when attacking, you may add the top or bottom of your life to your hand, then add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to your life. So this is one of the more important cards for the conversion of the top of your deck to the top of your life. And it curves into quite nicely the Teach. So if on 2 Dawn you play out Sanji, and on 4 Dawn you play out Teach, use Teach's ability to attach 2 Dawn to Sanji and put a juicy trigger on top of your life, then this Sanji will put it onto your life for you. And because you're effectively drawing that card from your life and triggering your leader ability, it's effectively a draw 2. So there's a lot to like about that, and that still leaves you with 2 Dawn unused for the turn, which you can use on leader to maybe swing a 7, effectively being a pretty strong turn. Next, there's the 4-cost 5,000 power 1k counter Daifuku, who has, similar to Sanji, the same effect, but his is only a Dawn ×1, and he comes on a more attacking body. So if you need the effect in a 2k counter, you can run Sanji. If you need it more in a body that generates board, you can play Daifuku. They work a lot the same with cards like Teach, or other ways of stacking the top card of your deck, like maybe the blocker Nami. Next one, this one is a lot more speculative. It has the same effect as the other ones, but it's on an on-play, and it's on a 2-cost 3,000 power with no trigger. So this would be one card that you could play if you were leaning more into the 2-cost synergies. There are a fair number of cards that synergize with exactly 2 costs, and this would be one of the ways you could synergize with that. But probably a lot more speculative than the others. And then finally, to wrap it all up, we have the 1-cost 2,000 power 1k counter Pudding, whose on play is look at the top 4 cards from your deck, reveal up to 1 Sanji or Big Mom Pirates type from other than Charlotte Pudding, and add it to your hand, and place the rest of it at the bottom of your deck. Importantly, even though the blue pudding is Big Mom Pirates, you can't search it because your searcher here specifically disables it. But this is the kind of glue that you would use to find your Linlins, find your blocker, and then maybe find some 2Ks. You've got lots of different searchable options here with this pudding. So that is the Big Mom package, and we will move on to the next package. So this one I've called the Straw Hat package, even though there's a couple cards that aren't Straw Hats in here. But let's kind of hop into it. So first we have the 4-cost 5,000 power. This is only a 1k counter. This is a misprinted image that I have here. And it has an on play of, if you have 2 or fewer characters with 5,000 or more power in play, play up to 1 power 6,000 or lower character from your hand that has no abilities. So the cards that you end up playing out of this are these 2 here. We have the Chopper, who's a 2k counter, 5-cost 6k, and we have the Charlotte Chiffon, who is the same thing but in yellow. So I include these 2 specifically because both are searchable with our searcher in this package. The 1-cost 2,000 power 1k counter, Capone Gang Beige, who has on play look at the top 4 of your deck, reveal up to 1 Fire Tank Pirates. Chiffon's Fire Tank Pirates, or Straw Hat Crew. We have Chopper type card with a cost of 2 or more, and add it to your hand. Then place the rest of the deck in any order. So you can use Beji to search for either the Usopp or the 2Ks to set you up for an early game kind of flood where you get a 5 and a 6 for a cost 4, which is pretty strong. Next we have the 4-cost 5,000 power 2k counter Frankie, who has a trigger of, if you have 1 or less life, you may play this card and then draw a card. The order is probably different on that. But effectively, if it is your second or your last life, you get to play a free body and you get to draw a card, which is a really strong thing, especially because with Hiori or otherwise life stacking, you can throw it at the very end of the game to get that last minute power boost that your opponents have difficulty predicting. Next, we have Red Rock, which is a Straw Hat type card. We've already gone over it in flexibility, but it is searchable off of this Beji, so I wanted to highlight it here. Similarly, we have this 8-cost 8,000 power Rush Luffy, another searchable card off of the Beji that synergizes with the rest of these. You can use this to pick up your Usopp, and then play out Usopp again. So say your 6Ks get knocked out, you can pick up Usopp, then play him back down on a future turn to get out another round of this go wide. We also have our Nami here. This leader ability, just to highlight, because we've been talking about the deck stacking thing. She is effective at that, but we've already talked about her otherwise. Next, we have the 6-cost 6,000 power 1k counter Nico Robin from OP11. Her on play is if your opponent has 3 or more life cards, trash up to 1 from the top of your opponent's life cards. So this, if you can play it early enough, will burn their life, which will trigger your leader ability. And then a lot of times you will just use her as a 1k counter or a 2k counter with leader ability. And she does have a trigger of play up to 1 yellow character with a cost of 3 or less from your hand. This can be effective if you are playing some alternate blockers, cheap blockers, or something, or if you are playing out a cheaper like attacking body that you just need to get on board. Most of the time, though, this trigger won't be coming up. Next, we have the 5-cost 7,000 power 1k counter Monkey D. Luffy, who has blocker, and then if you have 5 or more cards in your hand, this character can attack. This is an efficient body that can come out on curve really effectively and block. The 7k is pretty reasonable because it means you can defend your bodies better, because your leader ability can't defend your bodies, but the bigger blockers can in an effective way. So keep that in mind. And then once your hand gets low enough, then he can attack as well, which is pretty important. And then finally we have our searcher, who we've already gone over. So this is what I've dubbed the Straw Hat package. Plays a little differently than the other ones, focusing a little more heavily on filling the board in the mid game instead of trying to set up the triggers as much. Finally, this is the Three Brothers package. So one of the things that fits nicely with the life stacking abilities of Hiori or using Teach and Sanji is if you can know that the top card of your life is an Ace or a Luffy, then you get to play the Little Ace and Little Luffy. So let's start with the Little Ace and Little Luffy. They're both 2-cost, 2,000 power, 1k counters. With Activate Main, you may trash this character, reveal 1 card from the top of your life cards. If it is a Portocasti Ace with a cost of 5, exactly 5, then you play that card. If you do, up to one of your leaders gains 2,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. So, in effect, if you know the top card of your life, you get to play that card, and you get to become a 7k base leader until your opponent's next turn. And in Nami, that means for just 1 additional card, you can be a 9k leader until the end of turn, which is really effective at stifling aggro decks if you can get that high. So this is a synergy that is worth keeping in mind when you're building a deck. The 5-cost characters that you're looking to play out off of this, first off, we have the 5-cost 6,000 power 1k counter blocker Portocasti Ace. On play, draw 2 and place 2 cards from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck in any order. This is an effective way to stack your deck to use with other cards. So keep that in mind, and it's a card that can come off of the Ace. Next, we just went over this Luffy as another one. We can play off this Luffy. Next, we have another 5-cost Luffy. He's a 5-cost 6,000 power 1k counter. With Activate Main, you may trash this character. If you have 2 or less life cards, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less, then draw a card. So this can be effective removal in the late game for clearing out certain blockers, not all blockers. And then it gets to draw you a card. If you play it off of the Luffy, then you've got even more value off of it. And it also has, on top of that all, it has Trigger, which is KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So similar to his Activate Main ability, just off of the off of a trigger instead. Next, we already went over this 5-cost 6,000 power 1k Luffy. This one happens to be a Supernova, so it has a few more ways to stack it, which can be effective. And then next we have a 5-cost 7,000 power no counter Portocasti Ace. With on play, if you have 2 or less life cards, this character gains Rush. This is an effective way at kind of ending the game and worth investigating to go particularly with this Ace. Next, we have the 1-cost 2,000 power 1k counter Monkey D. Gart. He has on play, look at the top 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 Sabo, Portocasti Ace, or Monkey D. Luffy with a cost of 5 or less and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of any order, which will search for all of your 5s and your 2s. So great searcher for this particular archetype. Next, we have a 3-cost 4,000 power 1k counter blocker, Emporio Ivankov. On play, you may trash the top or bottom card of your life, which will trigger your leader ability. And then you reveal one cost 5 character, any of your things here, plus maybe Sattorii, and place it face down at the top of your life. So this is an effective stacker for the leader ability, or for the Luffy's ability, and a way to trigger your leader ability. And then finally, we have a searcher event. It works the same as Garb, just on an event with a trigger that is activate main to use the search ability. So that is the Three Brothers package. All right, now on to our final category. We have our other miscellaneous tech. So the first card we have here is a 4-cost 5,000 power 2k counter. This is Gion. She has on your turn, once per turn, when your opponent activates an event, your opponent places one card from their hand at the bottom of their deck. So this is a particularly good tech against the purple Luffys because it works really effectively against Gum Gum Giant. It makes it to where Gum Gum Giant is at least a -1 in hand, and often is more, especially when you can swing at 10 at the 6k leaders or at 9 at the 5k leaders. So this is just a great card for helping to punish those decks. Next one we have is the 3-cost 2,000 power no counter Marguerite. She is a blocker with on play draw 1 card. So this would be a card if you were considering getting rid of the 1-cost law blocker. Just as a way, if you're finding that you have a bit extra Dawn every turn that you play Law, you could consider playing Marguerite to get some card advantage in that same spot, and they work otherwise the same. After that, we have a 2-cost 0 power counter times 1,000 of the Shirahoshi, and her ability is when this character is KO'd by your opponent's effect, add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards, and then she has blocker. So this one is particularly effective against red and black decks who deal with blockers either through just attacking or by KOing them. It's less effective against blue and green and purple and the other colors, but particularly into red and blacks. If you see those in your meta, you can consider running this instead of the Law, just as a cheap blocker that has some extra effects. After that, we have the 3-cost 3,000 power 2k counter Capone Gang Beige, who has a trigger of up to one of your opponent's leaders or characters cannot attack this turn. This is a classic yellow card, great at kind of stealing away a game from an opponent who was ready to go for lethal. The kind of cheesy card that people dislike yellow for. It's always an option. Probably not the best option in Nami just because it doesn't do much on its own, but it will win you games if you run it. And probably ones where you won't feel like you deserve the win, but you will get the win nonetheless. Next card we have is the 3-cost 2,000 power 1k counter Vivi, who has on play if your leader is multicolored and you have 5,000 or 5 or less cards in hand, then draw 2 cards. So just a good card advantage card that works really well with stuff like Jozu and Slave Arrow, which we'll go over next, that give you the ability to return your own cards back to your hand. So getting into those cards, we have Jozu, who's a 6-cost 7,000 power with 1k counter character, and he has on play you may return one of your characters other than this character to the owner's hand, then return up to one character with a cost of 6 or less to its owner's hand. So Jozu's real good at picking up a couple of your own things, or picking up one of your things and bouncing maybe a blocker or an attacker from the opponent while establishing a 7k body. Just generally a solid card, and really good in Nami because of the number of cheap, particularly 2-cost bodies that you lay out on the board in an early turn, and they don't really do anything on the board. So if you can play out a Jozu to reclaim them as value or use them again, that's just a great place to be. And the other card that bounces things that I wanted to talk about is the 1-cost event Slave Arrow, which has counter, you may return one of your characters with a cost of 2 or more to the owner's hand. Up to one of your leader or characters gains 4,000 power during this battle. So this is just a great defensive event that lets you reuse your 2 costs, particularly Nojiko and Hiori, that you play out on an early turn and then get a big defensive boost by bouncing them back to your hand with Slave Arrow. It also has a trigger of draw 2 and place 2 cards from your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order. This trigger, if you find that you're unable to hold up Dawn for it, this trigger can be the kind of thing that gets rid of a couple no counter cards and can help you survive at the end of the game. Next card to go over is the 9-cost 9,000 power Sanji, and in the same vein, the 9-cost 9,000 power Yamato. They often would be seen together in a blue and yellow deck. So let's go over Sanji first. His on play is reveal 1 card from the top of your deck and play up to 1 character with a cost of 9 or less other than Sanji, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck. So what this effectively means is you get to play a second 9 cost off the top of your deck for free. If you can maneuver it into place. In Nami, there's a couple ways you can do that, either through Teach or through the Stacker Nami or maybe a Stacker Ace. There are several different ways you can get that top card of your library set up in a way that already is present in your deck, and then Sanji into a Yamato is 18 Dawn worth of play for just 9 Dawn worth of payment. Also convenient with the 9 costs is it leaves you 1 up for your leader so that you can put 1 on lead and have your leader ability be active on defense as well. Then going into probably the best target for that 9-cost Sanji, we have Yamato, whose on play is KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost equal to or less than the total of your and your opponent's life cards. Then, if you have 1 or less life cards, add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards. So the way that Yamato tends to work is you will engineer a spot where you can go down to 1 safely, and then if your opponent hasn't taken too much life, you get to play Yamato, knock out 1 of their guys, and heal 1. And in Nami, if you have maybe a Teach already on board, you can use, well, no, Teach won't work, but if you had played out maybe a blocker Nami on the prior turn, you can know what the top card of your library will be, so that that card can go into life, which can be a really important way to swing the game by being able to pick a card to heal into life rather than just replacing a card maybe you would see, like what you would see with the Sanji or Daifuku. And then the final card we want to look at here is the Gravity Blade Raging Tiger, which is a 7-cost event with main. Place up to 2 characters with a cost of 6 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck in any order. This one is very strong against aggro, just as a way of removing 2 bodies at pretty reasonable cost. And then it even has a trigger with place up to 1 character with a cost of 5 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck, which is great with our Hioris or Sanji or otherwise stacking, where we can get this into life and trigger it out against aggro in a way that really interrupts their flow. So another just solid pick, particularly against aggro decks. So those are all the cards I wanted to go over today. There are probably some that I missed, and I hope that anyone who's been watching Nami and theorizing about cards, if there's anything I missed, please go down in the comments and let me know what you think else should be included in this deck tech, and I'll make sure to comment and add my 2 cents on there. I think that there is so much variety that can be played with this Nami deck, and I'm really looking forward to playing it into the future and having it be one of my decks that I always keep up to date, just because of how much fun, flexibility, and self-expression that you can get into the deck list. But that's all I had for today, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.